Hi guys, welcome to my newest Hearthstone creation, the Weapon Cthulhu deck for Warrior. So this is another, it's a bit different from your typical Cthulhu deck. It is, in a sense, a budget Cthulhu deck because we do not have anything higher than a rare, so we don't have any epics or legendaries in this deck aside from Cthulhu, which is of course free. So the dust cost of crafting this deck is not very high. But what sets this apart from other Cthulhu decks is the fact that we have included a lot of weapons, and also we have included the card upgrade. So what this allows us to do is that we are not solely reliant on using Cthulhu as a win condition. If we don't draw it, like it's in the bottom of our deck, we can still win this game by playing it as kind of a tempo warrior where we use our Cthulhu minions, which have great base stats themselves, and also using the weapons that we have and the upgrade card to take out our opponent's minions and put pressure on them. Also, if we happen to draw our Cthulhu earlier, we don't have to keep it in our hand and keep it as the sole win condition with the battle cry, because if we can bring them down with maybe say like a 12-12 or a 15-15 Cthulhu, we can finish them off using one of our many weapons. So I'm gonna run through all the cards that we have in this deck, as well as the justifications on why I've decided to put them in here. There are some cards missing, like we don't have N'Zoth's First Mate, even though it does provide a 1/3 weapon, and that's because even though this deck does have a lot of weapons, we don't want to put it, we don't want to put too much in there, just enough so that we are have a high chance of having one in our hand at all times. Because at the end of the day, you do want to make your Cthulhu as big as possible. So the first card that we have in this deck is Execute, which destroys a damaged enemy minion for 1 mana. So this is just your staple basic card for Warrior. Really useful to get rid of big or threatening minions that our opponent plays. Um, Warrior doesn't have, we can use our weapons to take out any big minions that our opponent potentially play, but when you attack a minion with a weapon, you do take damage, and because we're not very focused on armoring up like some of those control warriors, fatigue warriors that you see, you want to avoid hitting your big opponent's minions with your weapons if you can. So this Execute is a great card to get rid of any threatening minion that you don't want to hit with your weapon. Then for 1 mana, we also have the Upgrade, and this is a card that synergizes really well with all the weapons that we have in this deck. Gives it +1/+1. You don't want to use it to equip a 1/3 weapon in general, especially because we do have a lot of other cards that cost 1 and 2 mana. So normally, if you have this card on turn 1 and you don't have anything else to play on turn 1, you should probably just keep it in your hand and save it from when you play a decent weapon, because the extra durability in particular does make a great difference because it allows you to take out an extra minion or maybe deal an extra 4 to 6 damage to your opponent's hero portrait, which is great. Next at 1 mana we have Whirlwind. This synergizes really well with Execute, synergizes really well with Acolyte of Pain, which I'll go through later to draw cards. Just a great value card for 1 mana. Also, potentially really useful against uh, aggressive decks, even though we're not a late game warrior deck by any means. Having this card in your hand to deal with some kind of aggro zoo deck or aggro shaman deck, this card can do a lot of work. Next at 2 mana, we have Fiery War Axe, which is often called Fiery Wind Axe by people, because it just gives such great value for 2 mana, 3/2 weapon. For 2 mana, essentially you can take out both your opponent's 2 mana and 3 mana minion. If you synergize it with Upgrade, it gives it 3 durability and 4 attack, which essentially, if you used it all on your opponent's face, or your opponent's hero portrait, you would get 12 damage out of it, which is fantastic. Out of 3 mana worth of cards, to do 12 damage potentially to your opponent is amazing. Uh, Next, for 2 mana, we have Slam, deal 2 damage to minion, survives draw a card. A fantastic card to cycle through your deck, or take out an aggressive 3/2 minion or 3/1 minion that our opponent plays early. This is a Cthulhu deck. when it comes down to it in the end. So having the opportunity to draw more cards will benefit you in the long run. So this is a great card that's very versatile. You can use it to kill a minion. You can just use it to damage a minion and kill it off with something else. So great, and it allows you to cycle through your deck, which is fantastic. Next at 2 mana is our 2 mana minion, Beckoner of Evil, which is just a basic 2/3 mana minion for 2 mana, which is average value and has a battle cry to give you a Cthun +2/+2, which is the most basic card with Cthun synergy. And of course, we put 2 of them in this deck because we do want to make our Cthulhu as big as possible when we play it. At 2 mana, we also have a Loot Hoarder, which is a 2/1 death without draw card. Similar to Slam, this is also a useful card to cycle through your deck. The fact that it's a 2/1 minion instead of a 1/1 means that it can trade with our opponent's 3/2 minions. And if you can trade with your opponent's 3/2 minions and draw a card from the death rattle, that's great value for a 2 mana card. Even if your opponent does get rid of it immediately, say maybe using a mage hero power or something like that, they do have to spend 2 mana to do it. So essentially it's a mana trade, and you get to cycle through your deck, an extra card through your deck, which is also good, still good. Next at 3 mana, we have Acolyte of Pain, which is a 1/3, and whenever this minion takes damage, draw a card. Ideally, you want to get 2 cards out of this if possible. However, don't hesitate, even if you just get 1 card out of it, just to cycle it. It does have 3 HP, which means that it will absorb damage from your hero. So yeah, this is also a staple card in any warrior deck, in most warrior decks, I should say, because the opportunity to draw up to 3 cards. Um, we also have Disciple of Cthulhu for 3 mana, which does 2 damage to either an enemy minion or opponent's face. Also gives Cthulhu +2/+2, which is good value because this does get rid of our opponent's 2 mana minions, or has a good chance to get rid of opponent's 2 mana minions. Also, it's very versatile. You can use it to deal extra damage to your opponent, and maybe put them in killing range. It can be that small finisher that you need at the end. So yeah, just a great card, and it is one of the rares that we have in this deck as well. Then at 3 mana, we also have Twilight Elder, which is a 3/4. 3/4 worth of steps, 3 mana is okay value. And at the end of the turn, it gives you a Cthulhu +1/+1 wherever it is. Ideally, of course, you do want to keep it alive for 2 turns, but don't worry, even if you keep it alive for 1 turn, because like I said, we want to make Cthulhu as big as possible. We're not super dependent on it being like a 20/20 when we play it. So having this trade into our opponent's 3 mana minion, and potentially killing it off as well, that's fine with us. We don't have to keep this alive, as long as other Cthulhu decks would like to keep them alive. Then at 4 mana, we have Apathy of Weaponsmith, which is a 3/3 and equips a 2/2 weapon as part of its battle cry. It's really good tempo card because it puts a minion on the board and allows us to get rid of 2 smaller opponent enemy minions. If we upgrade the weapon, it becomes a 3/3 weapon, which is great value, and can potentially deal extra 9 damage to our opponent's portrait, which is great. So for 4 mana, this is a great card. Also, because it gives a weapon, I chose this card over the Bloodhoof Brave, which is a staple in most other warrior decks. But we don't really need that ton. So we have this card instead, and also at 4 mana, we have this other card, Cthulhu's Chosen. Initially, I did try to remove Cthulhu's Chosen and put Bloodhoof Brave instead, but I discovered that Cthulhu's Chosen is better for this particular deck, simply because of the fact that it gives our Cthulhu +2/+2, and the Divine Shield can also be very annoying for our opponent to get rid of. If we can force our opponent to use mana to remove this card's Divine Shield, it does take a lot of pressure off us, and a 4/2 minion, it will trade into pretty much all of our opponent's 3 mana minions and most of their 4 mana minions as well. Then we go to the 5 mana card that we have in this deck, Arcanite Reaper, 5/2 weapon, 5 mana. Good at getting rid of our opponent's mid-game minions. Also can do an overall overall 10 damage to our opponent's hero portrait. If we combine it with Upgrade, it becomes a 6/3 weapon, which will do an overall of 18 damage, which is fantastic. If we can get it, because we can do something like 12 or 18 damage to our opponent's hero portrait, they're pretty much screwed from Cthulhu when we do get to play our Cthulhu, unless of course they have a lot of healing or a lot of armor as well. But this is just a great tempo card for this deck that's also very versatile because we can use it as a finisher if we need to. We don't have any 6 mana cards, but at 7 mana we have Ancient Shieldbearer, which is 6/6, and if your Cthulhu has at least 10 attack, gain 10 armor. Your Cthulhu should at least be a 10/10 by the time you have 7 mana. And also this puts down a 6/6 body, which our opponent has to get rid of, and it's not that easy for them to remove it because we do have a lot of weapons, which we will play earlier in the game, that will kill off any minions that he or she has, that they would normally use to contest a 6/6. Um, then at 8 mana we have Doomcaller, which gives your Cthulhu +2/+2, and if it's dead, shuffle it into your deck. So this is just like one copy of this card in this deck, which is like your backup in case you played your Cthulhu the first time, you couldn't kill your opponent, and your Cthulhu got killed by your opponent, and your weapons are just not doing enough damage. You play this card near the end of the game to bring your Cthulhu back into your deck, and hopefully the second time you play Cthulhu, it will deliver the killing blow on your opponent. One thing that's important to note is that we only have one card, one Doomcaller in this deck, so it's not something that we want to play on turn 8, unless we're desperate, we really need something on the board, because the primary purpose of this card in this deck, and the reason why we only have one copy, is because we really want it to, kind of return our Cthulhu to our deck so that we can play it again, in the event that it goes to the super duper late game, which is unlikely unless we are playing something like Control Warrior. And then at 10 mana we have Cthulhu. Shouldn't really need much explaining in here. The win condition of this deck. Even if it's at the bottom 3 cards in our deck, we do have the tools and the deck to play this like a tempo warrior, using our weapons. And I have won a fair few games with this deck where haven't even seen the Cthulhu at all. Just drawing an Ancient Shield Bearer and having our opponent doesn't have anything to deal with it because we already killed off all their minions with our weapons. So yeah, if you look at the mana distribution of this deck, you'll see that it's very mid-game heavy with a few late-game cards. Early to mid-game heavy, I would say. We have 4 2-mana minions, which means that we're pretty much always going to play something on turn 2. We have 6 3-mana minions, so we'll play something on turn 3. And we have 4 4-mana minions. So in turns 2, 3, and 4, we will have a lot of minions to play, and then we will also have some weapons to play during those turns. And on turn 7 and above is when we'll start looking to win the game with our Cthulhu and other big minions in this deck. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoy this deck, and you have success with it. I'm trying to go on the rank ladder to see how far I can go with this deck. And yeah, any suggestions?